Hi, it's John from Crafts by John. Today I'm going to be talking you through how I made this card. It's using a visible image stamp set, which is obviously the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, and I've set it in this time tunnel background. The theme of the card was for a challenge, which is all blues, hence I've made it with all different shades of blue. We've also got the "We're All Mad Here" sentiment and a fishbone and a cat scratch, and you can see it's quite an interesting card. The eyes, I've used glossy accents to make it more interesting, and I'll walk you through how I made the background using a gel plate and some inks and a brayer, and then how I've splattered it using brushos. I've then coloured using the stencil, and I've cut the stamp out that I've stamped and coloured for interest on top. So if you're interested in how I make this card, stay tuned. Okay, let's get started. So I've got here a piece of watercolour cardstock. This is a 300 GSM watercolour card. It's very important that you have a decent quality because we're going to be working with quite a lot of water today. So I'm going to use my glass mat. So I'm going to put that, apologies for the noise, on top of my cutting board. There we go. It doesn't look quite so good, I know, and there's a bit of reflection, I'm sorry, but we kind of need to do that. What I've got is my jelly plate. Now, I have a round one, but I'm actually going to use the square one. I kind of want it to fill this card, and I want the edges to be ragged. So I'm taking my jelly mat out. Now, various schools of thought about how you should keep these. Some people say you should keep them on the plastic, others don't. I must admit, I've always kept mine on the plastic. It's quite warm, but I think that kind of adds to the overall effect. So I'm going to anchor that down kind of central on my glass mat, and then it kind of doesn't move, which is good. I've got two different Elements inks here. I've got Della Blue and Mermaid, and I've got my brayer. So I'm going to use that to create a base layer of colour, and then on top of that I'm going to splat some turquoise and ultramarine dinkles. No, I tell a lie, sorry, brushos. These are brushos that I've watered down, and I've got a fan brush. This is from Lavinia. Kind of goes into 5 fans when it's wet, and it's really good when you tap on it. I want to create an interesting background. I'm going to be using this stencil over the top of it and using one of the colours to create a kind of vortex coming out of the middle of the card, and then I'm going to use this visible image Cheshire Cat stamp. I'm going to stamp this on another piece of paper. I'm going to colour it in blues. I'm making this card for a blue themed challenge. So I want a background that kind of almost fills the card but fades out on the edges, the vortex in the middle and the Cheshire Cat in the middle, and then I'll probably do "We're All Mad Here" as the stamped sentiment. So I'm going to start off with my two different Elements colours. So I've got my Della Blue and I've got my Mermaid, which are just slightly off the screen. I'm going to start by inking up the brayer. I'm not inking up the gel pad, I'm inking the brayer instead. So just on the left hand side of my brayer, a little bit of the Mermaid blue. And then what I'm going to do is ink that onto the gel pad. Now what you'll see I'm doing is I'm pressing down firmly on the left hand side, but as I get across the right, kind of easing the pressure up slightly. That way you get a nice fade from one side to the other. Now you can see you've got these natural kind of marks on the gel pad. That all adds to the overall texture. On the right hand side, I'm going to use the other blue. So I'm now going in on the right hand side of my brayer with the Della Blue, which is kind of a darker blue, and I'm going to start on the right hand side of my brayer, and kind of as I go to the left, just fade it out a little bit. It kind of all looks much the same colour, but it should come out slightly different. I'm going to get my brushos watered down. These little pots are really good for storing your brushos, but I must admit they are quite difficult to open. I do struggle sometimes to open them without it going everywhere. But anyway, I'm just going to take the lid off that. Apologies, it's slightly off the screen. So I'm just going to dip my brush in, and you'll see when I do that, it naturally goes into a fan. And then I'm going to grab a thick stencil brush, and I'm literally going to splat as much or as little as you want. Depends. If you want great big ones, do create big ones. If you want slightly smaller, do less. So I'm going to do that with 2 different shades of blue. So that's my ultramarine, which I'm just putting the lid back on before I spill it everywhere. And then I'm just going to clean that brush with some water. And then I'll do the same with the other blue. That was the ultramarine. I'm now going to do the turquoise. I mean, this all does look much the same, I have to say, on the gel mat, but it should look slightly different when we actually take the impression. So I'm kind of putting the turquoise more on one side than the other. Again, just going to spray just to clean that brush. It's good to clean as you go along. And then pop that back in its pot. Okay, let's put the lid on this before we forget and make a mess. There we go, that's on. Right, okay, so I've now got all my colour. What I want to do now, though, as I said to you, is I want to take some off the edges. So I'm just literally got a dirty cloth, and I'm going to go around the edges and just kind of take that off. Not paying too much attention to it. I kind of want a jagged effect. There we go. Right, we're at the point now where we're going to put our paper on. This is the moment of truth, and this is where we see what we've actually got. So I'm just going to lay my paper down and press it down. Now, at this point, one way to do this is with the brayer. You're going to get ink, because we haven't cleaned it, on the back. That doesn't matter, though, because we don't use the back of our card in card making. So that's a good way, though, to just suck up all that ink. And it's a good idea to leave the paper on the actual gel mat for a moment. So while I'm doing that, I'm just going to spray and clean my brayer. These are all water-based inks, so you're absolutely fine just to use water. The easiest way to clean that is to just roll it around, actually, while you're running the cloth over it. You do get quite inky hands doing this, but hey, it's all good fun. Mucky hands are all the fun of card making. Right, let's have a look. This is the moment of truth. Oh yes, look at that, perfect. What an interesting background. So we've got some quite nice big splats. We've got a mixture of different ones. That's really quite good, actually. I like that, and I like the fact that one side is more than the other. That's quite good. I'll probably use it like that way up, maybe. Right, so it's important to clean your gel pad as you go along. So just give that a bit of a clean. These are good. You can get them in a variety of different shapes and sizes, depending on your project. I'm just going to pop that over to the side. Right, I'm putting my glass mat away because we can now work happily on our normal mat. Right, I'm just going to give that a quick dry just to make sure that's dry. Apologies for the noise. We've got some really nice, that's really nice around that. Some really nice edges. Dry the back and the front. That encourages your card to stay flat and not curl up. There we go. Right, that's dry. So what we're going to do now, we're going to use these same colours with our stencil. Now this stencil, as I said, is from Visible Image. This one's called Time Tunnel. It's really useful. I've used it in quite a lot of different card projects. You could stick this down, but in all honesty, I'm probably just going to lay it in place because it's not going to be there that long. And what I'm going to use to put this blue on is I'm just going to use a smoothie. So these are my smoothies, typically used for distress oxides, but in this scenario, actually no, I'm not going to, I tell a lie, I'm not going to use my smoothie. I'm going to actually use a brush. So I would take a stencil brush that's had a blue on it, I think that one, and I'm going to use the darker of the two colours. This to me looks more mermaid than Della blue, so I'm going to use the darker blue. What I'm going to do is I want it concentrated in the middle, fading out, bearing in mind that I'm going to be sticking the cat on top of it. So I've got to bear in mind where I kind of want the centre of the vortex to be, which is slightly below, I think, the middle of the card. So I'm probably going to put it somewhere like that. So I will hold this in place while I do it. It's also a good idea when you're doing this to put a piece of paper underneath. These inks from Lavinia, the Elements ones, are very, very juicy. If you don't want to make a mess, you probably need to ink. Take some ink off before you start stenciling. So I'm just putting the ink onto the brush. This pad is actually not as juicy as I was worrying it was going to be. And then I'm literally just going over and over it with my stencil brush. Now, I don't want solid, so I'm kind of just working my way out from the middle, kind of following almost the lines of the stencil. This ink pad has actually dried up quite a lot. They're not new. I probably need to replace some of them, in all honesty. But I just want to create an inference of that kind of time tunnel vortex effect. Right, so I'm now going to move over to the other side. So I just position my hand so I'm holding it, and then I can give this side some attention as well. And you're just going kind of gently over it. It looks quite subtle, but when we take the stencil off, hopefully you will see the effect. Let's have a look. Without lifting it, yeah. So we've got that effect we wanted, basically. Quite kind of pale, but fading out to the edge. That's quite nice, quite subtle. I'm just going to give this a clean. There we go, our stencil is clean. Let's pop that over the side. Right, so we've done the majority of the actual base. I'm just going to dry that off. And it's quite nice because it's dark in the middle and then kind of fading its way out. And obviously at the moment we don't need to make any decisions about which way up it's going either. There we go. Right, we can leave that to dry a bit more whilst we do the rest of the card. So we're going to stamp this, the Cheshire Cat. Let's take this out of its packet, and we want mainly the cat at the moment. So I'm just going to grab a kind of scratch piece of card, and I'm going to use just an acrylic block to stamp this. These visible image stamps are really good, and I'm going to stamp it in blue. So I've got my VersaFine Deep Lagoon here, and I'm just going to ink this up. There we go. Should be nice and juicy. Right, I'm just going to go straight in for it. Put that down and just give it a good press. Now, while I'm doing that, I'm just going to get my ultra fine clear emboss powder out. I'm going to emboss this and heat it because I'm going to colour it, so I want some nice solid edges to colour up to. There we go, there's our image, and I'm just going to dip that into my emboss powder. There we go, and then heat that. This will give me a nice gloss dark effect on the blue. It also rises the edges up slightly, so it's easier to colour because it gives you an actual border to colour up to. You can see here I've got all the segmented pieces of the cat's tail. This will make colouring that easier. So heat the front. Always heat the back as well, just in case you've missed anything. I'm going to colour this on this separate piece of card, and then I'll cut it out because it's a fairly simple image. Cool, there's our Cat. Well, let me just clean that stamp. Just while I give that a moment to cool. There we go, that's cleaned. And I will use the sentiment off that set as well, probably. Okay, just pop that over there. Right, we're going to use, for colouring this, our teaser brush pens. If you've watched my other videos, you'll know I use these quite a lot. So I want to pick a couple of different blues, thinking like a turquoise and a kind of mid blue. That's a sapphire blue. Actually, I think I might go for this one instead. There's more contrast between those two colours. So let's pop that one back. And these are watercolour, so I'm going to be using my water brush to actually colour them as well. So how I will do this is I will daub colour and then pull that colour out. So I'm going to colour the cat, the face, in this kind of colour. So what I'll do is just lay a little bit of colour down, and then using my water brush, I will pull that colour about. Now, I might add more layers to this if I want to darken it, but first of all, I just want to lay a basic layer of colour down. You see, you don't need much ink. The inks react with water, and then you can pull them around. Very frugal way of making cards, and a very good, easy way of colouring. Okay, so that's what that colour looks like. I think we do need a bit more. So I'm now going to go in kind of around the edges mainly. Just lay a bit more ink down. And then, again, I'll pull that ink out using my water brush. It's going to be quite an unusual cat. You obviously don't really get cats in blues. But, as I said, this is a very blue themed card. And you can see by laying that colour down on the edges, you end up with dark on the edges, which is quite good because it gives you a bit of an almost 3D effect. I don't need to be too precise really in my colouring because I'm going to cut the cat out, as I've said. Right, so there we go, there's the face. Excuse me, let me get a mouthful of tea. And then we'll do the rest. So, main body. A lot of these pens are kind of quite dried up. I probably need to replace them, but I absolutely love them. This is an Arteza set, which I bought several years ago. I've been using them to death. And I use them all the time, to be honest. They are very, very, very good colouring pens. I find colouring with these so quick. I love using pro markers, but I find that that takes a while longer with all the blending, etc. Whereas these, you kind of blend them almost immediately. So I'm just colouring kind of loosely. That's the other colour we're going in with, is darker. It doesn't have to be that precise. You can always go back over the bit you've done. Okay, and then let's just do the tail. So we're just going to do segments. In alternating colours. And then using the water brush, just drag that colour out. Now, and the thing I find about these brushes as well, they're really good for natural things. I mean, I know a blue cat is fairly unnatural, but when I say natural things, I mean things like animals, plants, things in the natural world. If I was colouring something flat, like a kettle or a fridge, something that's a kind of inanimate object, I would probably use my pro markers because they're better for flat, solid colour. Whereas these are better for things that need kind of texture, shadows and depth. Right, there we go. There's a basic colouring. Just going to use my cloth to clean my brush. Squirt some water out and just clean that. Okay, and now this one I'm actually going to colour onto an acrylic block, and then probably use the colour from there. So I'm just going to pop the colour on the block and then take it off there directly with the brush. So you can see I'm loading up my brush and then just going to colour with the water brush straight in. This kind of gives you a slightly different effect. It's a solid, thicker colour, but it just gives you nice contrast from the other colour. You could colour in the same way as I did, straight on, but in this scenario, I'm just going to do it using the acrylic block. As I said, you can always go back over it if you want more colour. Even though I know I haven't got to be that precise because I'm going to be cutting this out, I always try to stay in the lines. It's just good practice, it keeps you honest for future projects. And then the big conundrum is going to be, what colour do I do his eyes? There we go, and we're nearly coloured. You can go over if you want a bit more colour. Some of these stripes maybe give them a little second coat so they're a little bit darker. Now you can see I'm dotting most of the time, so I kind of dot the colour because it leaves more ink on. If you paint, you find you get solid ink. If you dot, you get just a little bit more kind of contrast, and it leaves ink uneven, so it creates then almost like a 3D effect. And that's what we want. I mean, obviously we're not going for realism here with a blue cat, but you can see. Right, and now I need a different colour for the cat's eyes. So I kind of want another blue, but maybe just like a really light blue, maybe like this one. Yeah, that'll do. I'm just going to paint that on and then just water that a little bit. So it's still a blue, but it's just a different kind of colour. And then the teeth. Now the teeth is a good question. I'm not really sure quite what I'm going to do with them. I don't really want to go dark. Maybe, again, really light. I want it all to be blue. I don't want any other colour on this card really other than a shade of blue. There we go. There we go. So that's a very quickly coloured Cheshire Cat. So let me just pop those pens back in their holder. Clean up my water brush again. Just using a little bit of water on my cloth. Pop that away. Right, and then clean my obviously my acrylic block. Okay, let's just dry that off. Make sure it is dry. Now, this is the bit we don't like, which is fussy cutting, but this should not be too difficult to cut out, hopefully. So, fussy cutting, turn the card, not the scissors. So get the scissors into an angle that you're comfortable with, and then basically move the project so that you can just cut at the angle. So I'm cutting kind of loosely around the edge first of all, and then I'll go in and do the complicated bits. So I'm going to just cut that away so that I get rid of that bit, and then that allows me to kind of zoom in on the areas we need. This is a great stamp to cut because it's kind of got wobbly edges anyway. Just going to go down that way. And also, one thing I like about the visible image stamps, they tend to have quite thick lines. So if you cut a little bit away kind of by mistake, it's usually quite forgiving. There we go. Obviously, we're going to end up quite a thin little bit there, so we'll probably cut that last. So now you've got the whiskers conundrum here. I'm probably going to end up cutting them off, to be honest. What I might do is draw them back in just with a blue pencil once I actually stick it on the card. There we go, and then we're going to follow this line in. Fussy cutting is definitely not one of my favourite things. I know a lot of people out there enjoy it. My friend Denise does, she's a bit of an expert, but I certainly for one do not. I kind of can just about do it, but I'm certainly not good at it, and I certainly don't enjoy it. Right, now this is the difficult bit because we've got a really small bit here, so I'm going to kind of try and cut this bit using the wrong side of my scissors, really. I can't exactly clearly see what I can do or what I'm doing, but I kind of want to support that tail just while I'm cutting it, because that is a very, very narrow kind of join. Right, that should now, yep, there we go, and that's looking relatively okay. And then let's just go around here. And then again, turn the project, not the scissors. Cut to your strength. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. There's our little cat cut out, looking quite good. What I will do is I will do the eyes with some glossy accents before I finish the card. If you find you've got any edges where there's a little bit of white showing, what you can always do is go in with a sponge, find one that's got a bit of blue residue on it, and just kind of go round, and you'll find you can just slightly colour that white cardstock, and that will cover up a multitude of sins. You don't even need to ink this sponge, because if you keep them in a tub like I do, they stay kind of moist, and then you've always got a little bit of whatever colour you need. My sponges are in a terrible state, I really do need to replace them. Okay, so that's our cat cut out. So let's grab our base, and we're going to stick this on. Now we need to kind of decide where we're going to put it. I quite like that splat. I do want to kind of feature that. I think like that probably. And then I will stamp. We're all mad here at the bottom. So I think that's kind of, we're going to put him kind of in the middle. So I think like that. And I'm going to just stick it down. I'm not going to lift it up or anything. So I'm just using my little glue pot. And I've got quite a thin applicator here. So I'm just going round the cat with my glue in swirly patterns, just to get good coverage, paying particular attention to that joint. There we go. So that's glue, and then I'm going to grab my tweezers. So we want him kind of in the center, but slightly lifted. So I think probably about there. I'm going to use that same piece of paper and just flatten him down with my palm of my hand, using the heat from my hand to kind of activate the glue on the paper. Just rubbing all over. This is a clear, it's just basic PVA. People spend a lot of money on glue. I don't agree with it. You don't need it. It's over the top. It's just how companies make money. Here we go. Just give it a minute. There we go. And there he is. That's absolutely fine. Right, I'm going to use my stamping platform for the text because I can't afford to mess that up. So I'm just going to pop that in there. I've got a project in there that I didn't obviously finish. And pop him in and use my magnets. So I'm just going to pop those down. I think I'm just going to use that one. We're all mad here. So we'll have that kind of here. And then I might use a cat scratch and a fish. So I'm balancing it out. I've got the text, I've got the cat, one up high, one up low. There we go. That'll do. Right, so I'm going to stick that down, but the crucial thing I'm going to do is use my anti-static pad because I've created this background myself. You saw me do it. It's going to be with lots of fingerprints, lots of grease from my hand, and I don't want anything to kind of get in the way of the ink connecting with the paper. So I've just put my anti-static pad on there, just checking again for placement, and then I'll go in with my Deep Lagoon again, which is the same ink we stamped the cat in. So I'm just inking that up. Apologies you can't see that, it's on the other side of the stamping platform. I'm just going all over it with my ink. It might take a couple of impressions because obviously that paper is going to absolutely soak up the ink. Actually, it kind of looks all right, but I will give it one more for luck. There we go. There we go. That's nice. Cool. So that's done. I'm not going to heat emboss that, of course. I don't want it glossy. What I will do though, is just give it a little dry. Right, I just need to clean that off. That is a nice stamp set, that one. There's lots of different letterings you can use with that one. So that's good. Cool. Right, so that's out of the way. And then we just now need to finish it up. So I will now mount that on a card blank. I do actually have a blue card blank, which I'm going to use, which is quite unusual. So I'm just going to fold and score that using my bone folder. I don't think it needs another layer. I think I'll just go straight in because it's quite nice to not have the contrast of another colour. So how I'll do that is I'll do it with double-sided tape. So just take my double-sided tape, and just put that on the four sides. This is the Natasha Foot bunny ears technique, which allows you to reposition, which is quite good. You lift up these corners. I always use tweezers because I don't have nails. And then the middle one you take off completely. And then that allows you to position. So just make sure you've got your card opening the right way. Then lay it on loosely, and this just allows you to move it around and get it into the right place. So shimmy that around. The lighting's not great here, I have to say. So get it in roughly the right place, seeing that that's even. Press down the middle and then take the tapes off and press along with your fingers. There we go. And then, as I said, I will use my glossy accents just on the eyes. Always test on a piece of scrap first, just to make sure that's coming out okay, which it certainly is not. So I need to use my pin. Okay. There we go, now it's coming out. So I will just go in here. This dries clear and glossy. Just on the eyes, again, just dob it on, kind of create the shape and then fill the centre of that in. There we go. And that will dry nicely to give the cat nice glossy eyes. But hopefully you can see that effect. So there you go. There's our card done in, I don't know how many minutes, about 30 minutes. So we've got our vortex, we've got our background we created, we've got our stamped cat that's been coloured with glossy eyes. We're all mad here. And that's a card in completely just the blue colour palette. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, maybe give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe to my channel, and then you'll get notifications when I post other videos. Happy to share things with you, and hopefully you found that useful. Thanks a lot, and I'll speak to you soon.